Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. When I landed the job at Harrington Enterprises, I thought it was fate. A high-paying position, a modern office, and a chance to prove myself in the corporate world. What more could I ask for? My husband, Daniel, was so supportive. He celebrated with me, telling me how proud he was. It was perfect. From my first day, everyone whispered about the CEO. No one had ever seen him. They called him a mystery, a ghost, a genius who built the company but remained in the shadows. I found it fascinating. I'd always been curious, but I had no idea that my life was about to turn upside down. Then came the little things, subtle, strange things I ignored. My boss seemed to know personal details about me. My ideas were always approved faster than anyone else's. The executive assistant, Mrs. Langley, always gave me knowing looks. I brushed it all off, but in hindsight, the signs were everywhere. I just didn't see them. A few weeks in, I noticed something odd. The CEO, this faceless, nameless leader, only communicated through emails. No video calls, no board meetings, no personal interactions. It was strange, but everyone accepted it. Then, I started receiving emails that felt personal. Too personal. You did well on the Peterson report, Emily. I knew you would. I noticed you like caramel lattes. The best cafe is the one 2 blocks away. You looked beautiful today in blue. My stomach twisted. How did the CEO know these things? The Peterson report was only discussed with my team. The caramel latte, I had never mentioned it to anyone at work. And the blue dress? No one important had even seen me that day. I showed Daniel one of the emails, laughing nervously. Weird, right? His face paled for a second before he forced a smile. Maybe they just pay close attention to their employees. At that moment, I had no clue. No idea that the they was actually him. A month in, something impossible happened. I got promoted. Too fast, too soon. I barely had time to settle in before I was given a senior position, a corner office, and a significant raise. People started talking. She must know someone. That's not normal. I've been here for 3 years. Maybe she's sleeping with someone important. Their whispers stung, but I ignored them. I worked hard. I deserved this. Didn't I? Still, something nagged at me. Why did my promotion feel like a decision made for me, rather than because of me? Mrs. Langley, the CEO's assistant, gave me a smile one day and murmured, "You're special, dear. He takes care of his own." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. The company hosted a grand gala, an annual event where the CEO was supposed to make an appearance. For weeks, people speculated if he would finally reveal himself. Excitement buzzed in the air that night. I wore my best dress, sipped expensive champagne, and waited like everyone else. Then came the whispers. He's here. Finally, after all these years. I heard he's incredibly private. No one can even find a photo of him. A murmur spread through the crowd as someone stepped onto the stage. My breath hitched. The CEO had arrived. I turned, eager, curious, then froze. Because standing there, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, was Daniel. The room spun. My pulse pounded in my ears. This had to be a mistake, a trick of the light. But it wasn't. Daniel, my husband, was standing there, thanking everyone for their hard work, acting like the enigmatic, untouchable CEO I had heard so much about. The very man I worked for. The man I thought I knew. Gasps filled the room. Everyone was stunned. But no one was more shocked than me. His eyes found mine in the crowd. A flicker of something, guilt, fear, crossed his face. My hands trembled. I couldn't breathe. My husband had lied to me for years, and I had absolutely no idea why. After the gala, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions. Why? How? Why didn't he tell me? The next morning, I confronted Daniel. He tried to act calm, his usual charming self, but I saw the cracks in his facade. Why didn't you tell me, Daniel? Why keep this from me? I demanded, my voice shaking. He sighed deeply, running his fingers through his hair. Emily, I didn't want you to know. I never wanted you to find out this way. My heart broke. You've been lying to me all this time. Everything we've built, it's based on a lie. He took a step closer, his eyes filled with guilt. I never meant for it to get this far. But I couldn't help myself. The company was my dream. And you. I couldn't risk losing you over this. Daniel's words echoed in my head as I sat across from him. The man I loved, the man I trusted, had built an entire life full of secrets. Why didn't you trust me with this? I could have handled it, I said, my voice breaking. He shook his head. It's not that simple. The company is everything to me. I didn't want you to see me differently. I didn't want you to think I was using you for my own gain. Using me? I echoed. The idea was unbearable. But you did, Daniel. You've been controlling every part of my life without me knowing. His expression softened, but the guilt was palpable. I never wanted you to feel like that. I just wanted to protect you, keep you safe from the pressure. Days passed, and the weight of the betrayal grew heavier. Daniel was still my husband, but I could no longer see him the same way. Every glance, every touch now felt tainted by his deception. I started questioning everything. The promotions, the special treatment at work. Had all of it been orchestrated by him? One afternoon, I stumbled upon a folder in his office, a file labeled Project Emily. My heart sank as I opened it. The contents were chilling. There were notes about my career, my weaknesses, even my personal life. How I liked my coffee, how I preferred to work late at the office. All of it was meticulously documented. Tears filled my eyes as I realized that Daniel hadn't just kept secrets from me. He'd been controlling every part of my life, manipulating me in ways I never imagined. I confronted him again, this time holding the file in my trembling hands. Why, Daniel? Why would you do this to me? I whispered, feeling shattered. His face was a mask of regret. I never meant for things to get out of hand. But you were too perfect for the job, Emily. I couldn't let anyone else take you. It was never about control. It was about keeping you close, keeping you with me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved, was a stranger. He had turned our marriage into a game with me as the pawn. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away from him. I spent the next few days away from Daniel, trying to clear my mind. The quiet of the apartment felt deafening, but it also allowed me to think, really think, about everything that had happened. I kept wondering why he had done it. Why had he hidden so much from me? The lies, the manipulation, it was too much to process. I had married a man I thought I knew, but now I realized that the man I had married was a stranger in disguise. One night, as I sat on the couch, I received a message from Daniel. It was a simple text. I'm sorry, Emily. I will do anything to fix this. But could I trust him again? Could I ever look at him the same way after everything he had done? I sat there, staring at Daniel's message, torn between my emotions and the truth that had been revealed to me. Could I forgive him? Could I go back to the man I once knew and trusted? That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were a storm, each wave crashing harder than the last. I had always believed in love and honesty, but now, it felt like everything was built on a lie. The next morning, Daniel came over to the apartment. His face was etched with guilt, but his eyes were still full of hope. Emily, I never meant for this to hurt you. I want to make things right, I swear. I stood there, unsure of what to say. The hurt inside me was overwhelming, but part of me still wanted to believe in him. I loved him, but could love survive something like this? Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried everything to win me back. He sent flowers, wrote heartfelt letters, and even took me on romantic dinners. But the power dynamics at work hadn't changed. Every time I walked into the office, I was reminded of the man who held so much control over my life. The once exciting job now felt suffocating. Every decision I made was clouded by the knowledge that Daniel had orchestrated it all. One day, Mrs. Langley, the assistant, called me into her office. She sat me down with a serious expression. Emily, she said softly, I don't think you understand just how much he cares for you. He made a lot of sacrifices for you. But you have to decide if you want to be a part of this world, his world. Her words stung. What was she saying? Was this all some kind of game for them? The manipulation, the secrecy, the power. Was it all justified because of love? I tried to separate my personal feelings from the professional ones. I tried to ignore the way Daniel's power over me made me feel small, controlled. But it was impossible. The pressure of keeping up appearances, pretending that everything was normal when it was anything but, was wearing me down. One afternoon, I sat in my office, staring at my reflection in the window. For the first time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She was a stranger. She was someone who had been manipulated, someone who had been played. The tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I didn't know who to be angry at. Daniel, myself, or this entire situation. I didn't know if I was losing myself, or if I was just waking up to the reality of the man I had married. Things at home weren't much better. Every night, Daniel would try to talk. to fix what had been broken. But it was like walking on eggshells. We were both pretending that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I started questioning everything about our relationship. Was it real? Had he ever been honest with me? The love we shared, had it been real, or was it just another manipulation in the long list of deceptions? One night, as Daniel tried to reach out, I pulled away. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Daniel, I said softly. I don't know who you are. His face crumbled. I'm still the same person, Emily. I swear to you, I never meant to hurt you. But I wasn't sure. The damage was done. The distance between us felt insurmountable. A few days later, Daniel called me into his office, his real office, the one that I had never been allowed to enter before. As I stepped into the luxurious space, I felt a coldness in the air. The weight of the past few weeks was heavy on me. Emily, he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. I want you to know that I never wanted to put you in this position. I've made mistakes, but I love you, and I want you in my life, without the secrets, without the lies. I stood there, looking at the man I had loved, but I felt nothing but emptiness. The walls he had built around us, the trust he had broken, it was too much. I can't, Daniel. I just can't. You've shown me a side of you I can't ignore. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. His face fell, and I saw the hurt in his eyes. But I couldn't stay. Not in this world he had created. Not anymore. And with that, I made the hardest decision of my life. I walked out. Walking out of Daniel's office was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My heart felt heavy, and my mind was racing. I had left him, my husband, the man I loved, because I couldn't live with the lies. But it felt like I was breaking apart inside. The first few days after I left were a blur. I stayed with a close friend, avoiding phone calls and messages. Daniel tried to reach me, of course. He sent me texts, called, and even showed up at my friend's place. But I couldn't face him. I kept telling myself I had done the right thing, but doubt crept in. Had I made a mistake? Could things ever go back to how they were before? The questions haunted me, and I didn't have the answers. I thought I was free, but I was only starting to realize just how deep the ties between us had gone. Weeks passed, and the silence between Daniel and me grew louder. I still couldn't bring myself to speak to him. He had done everything wrong, and yet I felt the pull to him, to the life we had built together. I thought I had made peace with my decision. But then came the inevitable, the moment when my world collided with his again. One day, as I was leaving work, I ran into Daniel in the lobby. His face softened when he saw me, but I noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. He hadn't been sleeping well, and neither had I. Emily. His voice cracked as he said my name. I tried to look away, but his presence was magnetic, and I couldn't help but feel the warmth of his touch when he gently reached for my hand. Please, he whispered. Don't leave me like this. That moment in the lobby shook me. As much as I wanted to walk away and never look back, I knew deep down that I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to face it. Over the next few days, I met with Daniel, not at work, but in private. We needed to talk, really talk, and I was finally ready to listen to him. He opened up in a way I hadn't seen before, vulnerable, raw, and honest. I never wanted to hurt you, Emily. Everything I did because I was afraid of losing you. But I see now that I've pushed you too far. His words hit me hard. They were what I needed to hear, but they weren't enough to erase the years of lies. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I admitted, my voice trembling. Daniel looked at me with such sincerity that for a moment, I almost believed him. But the truth was, I was still scared of letting myself love him again. As time passed, I tried to find a sense of normalcy. I couldn't quit my job, at least, not yet. I had worked so hard to get here, and even though Daniel was the CEO, I couldn't let that define me. I had to separate myself from him, from everything he represented. But it wasn't easy. Every day, I saw him, across the room, in meetings, on emails. And every time I did, it brought back memories of everything I was trying to escape. One afternoon, as I worked on a report, I found myself staring at his name on a company-wide email. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly pushed the feeling aside. Daniel might be my boss, but I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. It was time to take back my power. The tension between Daniel and me continued to build. While we tried to maintain a professional relationship at work, the lines were constantly blurred. I was still his wife, and he was still the man who had broken my trust. One afternoon, as I worked late in the office, he appeared at my door, his face drawn with concern. "I miss you, Emily," he said, his voice low. "I'm not asking for anything, but I just need you to know that I'm here. I want to fix this. I'm sorry." I stared at him, my heart torn. The words felt genuine, but how could I know for sure? How could I ever trust him again after everything he had done? "I don't know if I can go back to how things were," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You've changed everything." He nodded slowly, a look of defeat in his eyes. "I understand. But please know, Emily, I'll wait for you. I'll be patient. I just need you to know how much I love you." Despite my best efforts to remain strong, there were moments when my resolve crumbled. One evening, I found myself alone in the office, trying to finish a project. My mind kept drifting back to Daniel's words, to the way he had looked at me with so much regret. I hadn't seen him in days, and my heart ached with longing. It felt like there was a part of me missing without him. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "I know you need space, but I can't stop thinking about you. Please, just give me one more chance." I felt the old pull, the warmth of his love that I had once known so well. The emotions inside me tangled into a mess of confusion and desire. Could I really move forward without him? I debated calling him back, but I knew that doing so would only delay the healing I so desperately needed. Still, in that quiet moment, I questioned everything. Was love enough to make the past disappear? A week passed without any significant change. Daniel and I had barely spoken outside of work. The silence between us felt unbearable, but neither of us knew how to break it. At work, I kept up my professionalism, but the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone could feel it. My colleagues began to treat me differently, as if they knew what was going on, but no one dared to ask. One day, as I walked through the hallway, Daniel was standing by the elevator. He looked at me with a mixture of hope and despair. "Emily," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk. But not here. Not in front of everyone." I nodded, though my heart raced. What did he want to say? Was this the moment he was going to confess everything, really everything? We met later that evening in a quiet cafe near the office. Daniel sat across from me, his hands trembling slightly. His gaze was fixed on me, like he was searching for something in my eyes, waiting for a sign that I might forgive him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his voice strained. "And there are things I never told you. Things I should have told you from the start." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Daniel?" His expression was full of guilt as he leaned forward. "The truth is, I didn't just keep you in the dark about my role as CEO. I kept a lot of other things from you too. You were never meant to be part of this world, Emily. But you're my weakness. And that's why I tried to keep you separate, away from the pressures of this company." I was taken aback. "You mean you try to protect me?" "Not just protect you," he replied quietly, "but control you. I thought that if I kept you in the dark, I could keep you safe from the stress and manipulation. But I realize now that I've only hurt you more. I'm sorry." I stared at him in disbelief. He had lied to me all this time, claiming he was protecting me when he was actually hiding the truth, keeping me isolated. The realization was painful. I felt both betrayed and suffocated. As the days wore on, I struggled with the weight of his words. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the anger, I still loved Daniel. I didn't want to let go. But how could I move forward knowing the man I trusted the most had been hiding things from me all along? The next day, Daniel came to my office and asked if we could talk. I agreed, my heart racing in anticipation. When he arrived, I could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Emily, I don't want to live without you, but I know that I need to earn back your trust. It's going to take time, but I'll wait as long as it takes." The words were what I had longed to hear, but they came too late. The damage had been done, and I knew deep down that it was time for me to take control of my life again. "I can't, Daniel," I said softly, my voice firm yet filled with sadness. "I can't keep living in a world where I don't know who you really are. I need space, and I need time to heal. I need to find myself again, without you." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw the man I had married, the man I had loved so deeply. But I also saw the man who had betrayed me, and I knew that I had to walk away. Leaving Daniel wasn't easy. It never would be. But the struggle of holding on to a love that was built on lies was harder. I spent the next few months focusing on myself, reconnecting with old friends, and rediscovering what it meant to live without Daniel. It wasn't easy, and some days felt like a battle. But with each passing day, I grew stronger. I learned to embrace the independence I had lost, to trust myself again. Eventually, I moved into my own apartment, a place that felt like a new beginning. The weight of my past with Daniel still lingered, but I was determined not to let it define me. I still loved him, but I was no longer the woman who needed him to complete her. I had finally found the strength to let go. Months passed, and life started to find a new rhythm. I was busy with work, making new friends, and focusing on my personal growth. I was starting to feel whole again, independent and confident. Then, just as I had begun to settle into my new life, I ran into Daniel at a conference I was attending. I hadn't seen him in so long, and the moment I laid eyes on him, all the emotions I had buried came rushing back. He looked different, older, perhaps, more tired, but still the man I had loved. "Emily," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't expect to see you here." I froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. My heart ached with the memories, but I couldn't let myself fall back into the trap. "I didn't expect it either," I replied coolly, my tone firm, but my heart was beating faster than I liked. The conference was a blur. I found myself lost in a sea of professionals, but my thoughts were with Daniel. We had exchanged a few polite words after our initial encounter, but the tension between us was undeniable. That night, after the conference events had ended, I received a message from him. "I'm sorry for everything, Emily. I know it's been months, but I still think about you every day. I never stopped loving you. If you can, let's talk. Please." My first instinct was to ignore it, but as I sat there in my hotel room, alone with my thoughts, the pain I had been holding on to slowly began to surface. Was I ready to forgive him? Could I even want to? I thought about everything we had been through, the love we shared, the betrayal, and the eventual healing. I couldn't deny that a part of me still wanted him, still yearned for the life we could have had. But could I trust him again? I agreed to meet Daniel the next day. We met at a small cafe, a neutral space where we could talk without interruptions. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, but this time, I wasn't going to hold back. "Daniel," I began, "I've thought about what you said, and I can't pretend that it doesn't hurt. You kept so much from me, about you, about your job, about everything. I felt betrayed, and I still do. But I also know that I'm not the same person I was when we first met." Daniel listened quietly, his eyes filled with regret. "I understand, Emily. I was selfish. I thought I could control everything, our lives, our future, without realizing that I was pushing you away. But I love you. I've always loved you, and I'm not asking for you to take me back. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry." For the first time, I could see the depth of his remorse. But as much as it hurt, I couldn't ignore the fact that things would never be the same. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Daniel," I said quietly, "but I'm learning how to forgive myself." We left the cafe that day with no clear answers. Daniel had apologized, but the weight of everything that had happened still lingered between us. As much as I cared for him, I had come to realize that I had to choose my own path. Weeks passed, and I found myself settling even further into my new life. I wasn't the woman I was before. I was stronger, more aware of my worth, and more determined than ever to take charge of my future. One day, I received a phone call from the CEO of a new company, an offer for a position that was even more prestigious than the one I had at Daniel's company. It felt like the universe was pushing me forward, urging me to take control of my destiny. I accepted the offer, knowing that it was time to start fresh, without the shadow of Daniel or his secrets hanging over me. The day I left my old company, I ran into Daniel one last time. He looked at me with a mix of sadness and pride. "I see you're moving on," he said quietly. "I guess this is it then." I nodded, my heart full of emotions I couldn't quite express. "I don't know what the future holds, Daniel, but I know I'm on my own path now, and I'm finally free." He smiled softly, though there was a tinge of regret in his eyes. "I hope you find everything you're looking for, Emily. You deserve it." As I walked away from him for the last time, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had loved him, and I had lost him, but I had also found myself along the way. And in the end, that was all that mattered. I had learned to trust again, not in him, but in myself. And that was the greatest gift of all. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you liked the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.